Hello my friends. Advances in crime scene investigation and DNA technology have improved police work. But it is unfortunate that some gruesome murders remain unsolved. No matter how hard investigators work, some killers remain undetected. Their victims are left without justice, even decades later. In this video we show you 10 unsolved murders of ordinary American women that have baffled and frustrated investigators for years. 10. Garnet Gin. Garnet Gin was a popular home economics teacher in the small town of Portland, Indiana. So when she didn't show up to school one day in February 1950, the students became upset, and the district superintendent went to her house to check on her. In the garage, Jane's lifeless body is found hanging from a sewing machine belt around her neck. The police determined that she died by suicide. The beloved teacher's body was taken to the funeral home and buried. Weeks later, Jane's family exhumed her body and requested an autopsy. The coroner found that she had been strangled before being hanged. She was also shot in the head at least 7 times before her death. Police took another look at the garage and found broken roof shingles. The cops developed a new theory: Jane was attacked in her garage after returning home one night. A neighbor reported hearing screaming around the time Jane arrived but thought it was a cat. Another neighbor saw a shadow in the garage that night but thought it was Jane. The police never identified the killer. 9. Betty Gail Brown. In late October 1961, Betty Gail Brown spent a late night studying at Transylvania College in Lexington, Kentucky. Shortly before midnight, she left her residence, got into her car, and headed to her parents' house. Witnesses reported that she later returned to campus and parked her car in the driveway of a building. Growing concerned about her daughter as the hours passed, Brown's mother, Quincy, drove the route between the family home and the college 3 times. However, she never passed the building where the car was parked, and was unable to find her daughter. Just after 3 a.m., a Quincy police officer pulled over. There, he informed the worried mother of her worst nightmare: 2 hours earlier, Betty Gail had been found dead in her car. The university student was strangled with her bra. Police discovered that Betty Gail had not been assaulted again. She also left her wallet untouched, eliminating robbery as a motive. The car keys were found in the back seat. 4 years later, an Oregon man confessed to killing Betty Gail. Quincy was skeptical, but the man was extradited to Kentucky and charged with the crime. His trial resulted in a hung jury. He subsequently retracted his confession and was never retried. Investigators again found no solid evidence. More than 6 decades later, Betty Gail's murder remains unsolved. 8. Camp Leota. The unsolved Camp Leota murder, the infamous. The world of Leota Camp was as it should be on the morning of July 10, 1967. The Des Moines, Iowa, housewife said goodbye to her husband as he left for work and began the day's chores. First, the 25-year-old hung laundry in the backyard while the couple's 3-year-old daughter Brenda and 4-year-old son Kevin played nearby. She then went inside to check on her newborn daughter, Christine. The 2 older children played outside until noon when they came in for lunch. There, they discovered an unimaginable sight: their beloved mother was lying face down with her mouth, hands and feet bound. She had been stabbed 4 times. The knife was still in her back. The children ran to a neighbor's house for help. First responders arrived at the camp while she was still alive. Unfortunately, the wounds to her upper back were so extensive, Leota died on her way to the hospital. Police discovered that nothing had been stolen from the home, and the children had not heard any struggle while outside. A neighbor reported seeing a man in a black Ford Mustang parked near the camp house before the murder, but that lead went nowhere. In the years that followed, police were never able to find her killer. 7. Maria Abatello Smith. The murder of Maria Abatillo Smith has baffled Colorado cops for 45 years. On November 20, 1977, the 30-year-old woman was reported missing after she failed to show up for work at the Airmen's Club at Lurie Air Force Base in East Denver. The cops didn't have much to do at first. That changed 6 days later when her body was found in a field on Mariposa Street about a mile south of downtown Denver. Investigators confirmed the identity of the dead woman and were able to determine that she had been murdered. From there the case went cold. The police have been searching for leads over the past decades, but nothing has developed. The Denver Police Department still considers the case active and hopes to one day find her killer, but there's not much more to say. 6. Lisa O. Lisa O finished her job as a hairstylist at Susan Beer's salon in Kailua City on the evening of January 20, 1982. From there, the 19-year-old told co-workers she was on her way to see her boyfriend at his sister's apartment across the street. Oahu Island in Makiki. Along the way, I stopped to buy Poke. She arrived at the apartment and hung out with her boyfriend for a few hours before leaving for her home in Kailua. Sadly, it never got there. The next day, O's concerned parents called her boyfriend. When he traces her possible journey from his sister's apartment back home, he finds her car on the side of the highway. The driver's window was rolled back halfway. Inside, the man found her purse, but her driver's license was missing. The missing identity indicated to investigators that a police officer could have been involved in O's disappearance. Investigators launched an island-wide search, and less than 2 weeks later, Lisa's body was found in a ravine. A police officer who lives near O was arrested and recently charged with sexual harassment in a separate case. However, no evidence could be linked to him, and prosecutors chose not to charge him. O's driver's license was also found. She had accidentally left it at the Poke shop while paying with a check earlier that night. A newspaper delivery driver in the area later told cops that at 2:30 a.m. on the night of O's disappearance, he saw a man driving his car with what appeared to be an unconscious female passenger. However, this advice went nowhere, and investigators are still scratching their heads 40 years later. 5. Mary Schli. Mary K. Schli, 30 years unsolved, trailer. Mary Schli was a college student in Minnesota in 1974 when she decided to hitchhike down Interstate 94 to Chicago to attend an art show. She moved around a lot during her college years, but this time would be her last. Hours after she left, a man in rural Minnesota called police after seeing someone standing on the side of the road and throwing a body into a ditch. Police responded and discovered Schli's body. She was stabbed more than 15 times. The witness information was used by a sketch artist to create a profile, but no arrests were ever made. In 2009, Schli's body was exhumed by investigators searching for DNA evidence. The character closely matches Randall Woodfield, a former professional football player who cops allege killed more than 40 women in his life. Woodfield had previously been convicted of a different murder and was serving a 90-year prison sentence. Because he was already incarcerated, Minnesota investigators were never able to interview Woodfield about Schli's death. Her case remains open. 4. Suin Evans. Suin Evans was a 21-year-old student at the University of North Carolina in the summer of 1965. July 30th was like any other day for Evans. She saw friends on campus and visited a professor's midday office hours. Hoping to save time getting back to her dorm before driving home for the weekend, she cut down the campus arboretum. Inside the nature reserve, she was grabbed from behind by a man who unexpectedly emerged from the bush. Evans screamed and struggled. Her persistence must have shocked the attacker because he escaped. The disturbance was alerted by another student and a nun who were passing by. Unfortunately, before fleeing, the attacker slit Evans' throat and stabbed her in the chest. She quickly bled to death in the nun's arms. Police quickly arrested 5 different people on campus but had no evidence to press charges. A comprehensive inspection of the nursery failed to find the weapon used in the attack. From there, the case baffled the police. Evans' killer has never been found. 3. Tamara Lee Tiger. In April 1980, fishermen outside Oklahoma City discovered the body of a woman on a riverbank. She's been shot. It was also covered in lime, which police suspected was intended to speed up the decomposition process. Ironically, the material partially mummifies the victim, preserving evidence. However, police were unable to identify her, even with dental X-rays and the unique tattoo on her chest. The media dubbed her the Lemon Lady, and the case went cold. 40 years later, the DNA Doe project was able to match the woman's dental records to a set from a U.S. Army private. Thus, the researchers concluded that the name of the Lemon Lady is Tamara Lee Tiger. Her remains were discovered on her 21st birthday. But even with this new knowledge, police still don't know what led to her death. Although the identity of Lady Lime is known, the circumstances of Tiger's murder remain a mystery. 2. Joan Reynolds. Joan Reynolds was an aspiring singer studying music at Rhode Island Junior College. One night in February 1980, the student returned home to her rented cabin in North Kingstown. The next day, her lifeless body was discovered in her room. She had been stabbed more than a dozen times. Neighbors in the adjacent apartment building confirmed that they had seen her returning home late the previous night. But despite his proximity to the scene, no one reported hearing strange noises or seeing suspicious activity that night. Police determined that she was killed sometime between midnight and 10 a.m. Beyond that, investigators didn't have much to say. Joan mostly kept to herself before her murder. Police had long suspected she knew her killer because there was no sign of forced entry at the crime scene. In recent years, cold case investigators have tried to find information through social media agents. It is unfortunate that Joan's murder remains unsolved. 1. Lillian Richie. Lillian Richie was a 51-year-old widow living alone in Nampa, Idaho, in 1964. One February night, she visited a nightclub with a friend who was in town for a livestock conference. The friend drove her home late that night and dropped her off just after 2 a.m. before going to his hotel. The next morning, he drove back to Lillian's house to return the car and have breakfast. However, it was nowhere to be found. When she did not show up for work at a local jewelry store the next day, her friends called the police. After investigating, the police acquitted Lillian's friend of blame in her disappearance. Unfortunately, the police were unable to find any trace of the widow. Decades passed without any solid evidence, and she was presumed dead. In 2018, the Nampa Police Department acted on a report that Richie had been murdered and buried in the foundations of a school building. With the help of the local college's archaeology department, investigators excavated under the building. However, the search showed no remains. Richie's disappearance remains a mystery. At the end of the video, do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell to receive the latest videos.